The flagship Eternal Dominion hung in the darkness of space like a metal god. It was 3 kilometers long and carried enough weapons to burn entire continents. Around it floated 4,000 warships of the Valkyrie hegemony, the greatest military force in 3 galaxies. They had come to conquer another world. They had done this 300 times before. This would be their 301st victory. Supreme Commander Thaxfall stood at the center of his War Council chamber. His gray skin was stretched tight over sharp bones, and his fore glowed with the confidence of a being who had never known defeat. Around him sat 12 high commanders, each one responsible for millions of soldiers and hundreds of ships. They looked at the blue and green planets spinning slowly below them. Primitive world number 4217. Thaxfall said, reading from the holographic display. The natives call it Earth. They are bipedal mammals with soft skin and fragile bones. They breathe a nitrogen-oxygen mixture. They have only recently achieved basic space travel. Their fastest ships would take years to reach their nearest neighboring planet. The commanders laughed. This would be easy. This would be boring. Some of them wished for a real challenge. High Commander Drekka leaned forward. She was older than the others, with scars on her face from battles fought long ago. What is their military capability? Thax waved his hand, and new information appeared in the air. They have primitive projectile weapons, chemical explosives, no energy shields, no faster than light travel. Most importantly, they are not united. Their planet is divided into many separate nations that constantly fight each other. They will not be able to organize a defense. How long until full conquest? Asked Commander Vexal, a young and eager officer who wanted glory. 72 rotational cycles. Thaxfall replied, we will destroy their military installations from orbit, land our troops in strategic locations, and accept their surrender. Standard protocol. The commanders nodded. They had done this many times. The process was simple and efficient. Primitive species always surrendered once they understood the power they faced. But then a small voice spoke from the back of the room. Supreme Commander, there is something strange in the planetary data. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. She was Cathra, a junior tactical analyst. She was young and had never seen real combat. She should not have spoken without permission. Thax's 4 eyes narrowed. Explain yourself. Cathra's hands trembled as she pulled up a file on her data pad. The planetary classification. Supreme Commander, this world is listed as a Class 15 death world. Silence fell over the room. The commanders looked at each other with confusion. That is impossible, said High Commander Yifnal. The classification scale only goes to Class 12. I have personally conquered Class 11 worlds and they were barely survivable. Check your data again, Thaxfall commanded. There must be an error in the system. Cathra checked. She checked 3 more times. There is no error, Supreme Commander. The classification is confirmed. Class 15. The file also contains a warning. She paused, afraid to continue. Read it, Thaxfall ordered. Ketra swallowed hard. It says do not engage, do not contact, quarantine recommended. For a moment no one spoke. Thenval began to laugh. It was a cold, harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. Quarantine recommended, he repeated, for a world of soft-skinned primitives who still burn dead plants. For energy, look at them. he pointed at. The planet below, they have no acid. Atmosphere, no silicon-based predators. No intelligent plant life that hunts. Pray, what could possibly make this world so dangerous? Commander Drekko was not laughing. Perhaps we should investigate further. Before. What? Thaxval interrupted, before we add. Another easy victory to our empire. The hegemony has conquered species far more advanced than these humans. We have defeated enemies with technology that these creatures cannot even imagine, and you want me to be afraid of a classification number? No one argued. Saxville was the supreme commander. His word was law. The classification system is old and flawed. Thaxval declared it was created by scientists who were afraid of their own shadows. We are warriors. We do not run from primitive worlds because a computer tells us to be. Careful, he turned to face the planet. Once more, from here it looked peaceful. Beautiful even, white clouds drifted over blue oceans and green lands. It was hard to believe that anything dangerous lived there. Send the surrender demand. Thaxval ordered, give them one rotation cycle to respond. When they refuse or fail to answer, we begin the invasion. The communications officer sent the message. It was transmitted in all known languages and repeated on all frequencies. The message was simple. Surrender immediately or face complete destruction. The Valkyrie waited. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 5. The planet remained silent. No response came. No surrender was offered. They are afraid, Commander Vexol said with satisfaction. They have seen our fleet and they know they cannot win. They are probably fighting themselves right now, trying to decide what to do. Thaxval nodded. Their silence is expected. Primitive species often freeze when faced with superior power. They cannot comprehend what they are seeing. But then, after 6 hours of silence, transmission came from the planet below. The communications officer's face went pale. Supreme Commander, we are receiving a response. Put it through. The holographic display flickered. The message was short. It was written in crude galactic common, the universal language used by space-faring species. The humans had somehow learned enough of it to write 5 words. 5 words that would haunt the Valkyrie forever. Come and take it. Commanders stared at the message. This was not the response they expected. Primitive species begged. They pleaded. They offered tribute and slaves and anything else to avoid destruction. They did not challenge the greatest military force in the known universe. What does this mean? Commander Yithnal asked, confused. Are they too stupid to understand their situation? It means nothing, Thaxval said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. It is the desperate bravado of doomed creatures. They will learn their mistakes soon enough. He turned to address his commanders. Prepare the invasion force. I want drop pods ready. Within the hour, we will land troops in 4 locations simultaneously. The frozen northern region, the dense forest zone, the southern desert continent, and the Great Sand Desert. We will establish control of these areas, then move toward their population centers. Why not simply bomb them from orbit? Commander Drethka asked. It would be faster because I want prisoners, replied. I want to study these creatures. I want to understand what makes them foolish enough to challenge us. And when we parade their leaders through the streets of our capital, every species in the galaxy will see what happens to those who defy The hegemony. The commanders rose and went to prepare. Their forces, only HFY remained, staring at the planet below with growing unease. She had studied the data files more carefully than the others. She had seen things that worried her. This planet had extreme temperature variations, massive storms that could destroy cities, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, oceans filled with creatures that killed anything that entered the water, land predators with teeth and claws, flying creatures that attacked in swarms, and the humans had survived all of it. They had thrived in every environment on their deadly world. But no one wanted to hear her concerns. She was just a junior analyst. What did she know about conquest? HFY watched as the first drop pods launched from the fleet, thousands of them carrying the finest soldiers in the hegemony. They fell toward the blue and green planet. Like metal rain, she whispered to herself, repeating the humans' message. Come and take it. There was something in those words, something dangerous, something that the commanders had missed. In their arrogance, it was not fear, it was not bravado, it was a promise. Humans were not afraid, they were waiting, and deep in her gut, HFY felt a terrible certainty. The hegemony had just made the worst mistake in its long and bloody history. Below on the planet called Earth, the humans watched the drop pods fall from the sky. They have been preparing for this moment ever since the alien fleet appeared in orbit. They had stopped fighting each other. For the first time in their history, they were united, not united in fear, united in something far more dangerous. They smiled as the enemy descended. They checked their weapons, they kissed their families goodbye, and they went out to meet the invaders with the same words their ancestors had used for thousands of years. Come and take it. The Valkyrie were about to learn what those words truly meant. Commander Vexel was the first to land in the frozen northern region the humans called Siberia. He stepped out of his drop pod with confidence, his weapon ready, his armor gleaming. 50,000 of the hegemon's finest soldiers landed behind him, forming perfect lines on the white ground. Then the cold hit him. It was like nothing he had ever experienced. The temperature was degrees by human measurement. Vexel's breath froze in the air. His fingers went numb inside his gloves. His joints began to stiffen. Commander, one of his officers called out, his voice shaking. The soldiers are having trouble moving. The cold is affecting their motor functions. Vexel tried to respond, but his jaw was not working properly. The Valkyrie came from a warm world. Their bodies could not process temperatures below 15 degrees. They had known this planet had cold regions, but they had not understood what cold truly meant. Within 2 hours, 300 soldiers were dead, not from enemy fire, not from combat. They simply froze. Their blood slowed and stopped. Their organs shut down. They fell into the snow and never rose again. Retreat to the pods. Vexel finally managed to order, but the drop pods were not designed for extraction. They were one-way transports. His army was trapped in a frozen hell with no way out. And then through the swirling snow, the humans came. They wore thick clothing that covered every part of their bodies. They moved easily through the snow as if the cold did not affect them at all. They carried primitive projectile weapons that fired small metal pieces at incredible speeds. The first battle of the invasion lasted less than an hour. The Valkyrie soldiers could barely move. Their weapons malfunctioned in the cold. Their armor cracked and split when the metal froze. The humans moved around them like ghosts, striking and disappearing, striking again. Vexal sent a desperate message to the fleet. The environment is hostile beyond calculation. Request immediate evacuation. Request. The transmission ended. Vexal was not heard from again. Far to the south, Commander Yithnal was having his own problems. His forces had landed in a dense green forest the humans called the Amazon. The air was thick and wet and hot. Strange sounds came from every direction. Things moved in the shadows between the massive trees. Establish a perimeter. Yithnal ordered, secure the landing zone. His soldiers spread out into the forest. Within minutes the screaming began. Soldier came running back to the perimeter, tearing at his armor. "Something is inside me," he shrieked. "Something is eating me from within." The medics cut open his armor and found thousands of tiny creatures burrowing into his flesh. The humans called them insects. The Valkyrie had nothing like them on their world. These small things, so small they could barely be seen, were killing his soldiers faster than any enemy weapon. Another soldier collapsed, covered in tiny red creatures that bit and stung. Another was found wrapped in the coils of a massive snake, his bones crushed to powder. Another simply walked into the forest and never returned. They found his skeleton 3 days later, picked clean by things they never saw. The plants were no better. Some had thorns that injected poison. Others released clouds of spores that made soldiers hallucinate and attack their own comrades. The ground itself was dangerous, soft mud that swallowed soldiers whole, hidden pools of water filled with creatures that tore flesh from bone in seconds. Commander Yithnal climbed a small hill to get a better view of the situation. As he stood there, something small and colorful landed on his arm. It was a tiny creature with delicate wings. "Beautiful, really. What is this?" he asked his aide. The aide checked the database. "The humans call it a butterfly, Commander. It is harmless." Yithnal relaxed. Perhaps not everything on this world was deadly. Then the ground beneath him moved. A creature burst from the soil, long and covered in segments with massive jaws that could cut through metal. It grabbed Yithnal's aide and pulled him underground in less than a second. His screams faded as he was dragged into the dark earth. Yithnal ran, the supreme commander of the Amazon invasion force, conqueror of 12 worlds, ran like a frightened child. He did not stop until he reached the landing zone. Of the 40,000 soldiers he had landed with, fewer than 5,000 remained after 3 days, and they had not yet faced a single human in combat. On the southern desert continent, the situation was even stranger. Commander Rithvos had chosen this location because the Valkyrie preferred warm climates. The Australian outback seemed perfect, hot, dry, open terrain where they could see enemies coming. What they could not see were the dangers hidden in the sand. A soldier stepped on a small creature with 8 legs. It bit him once. He was dead in 4 minutes, screaming in pain as his nervous system shut down. Another soldier found a hole in the ground and looked inside, curious. Something jumped out and attached to his face. The medics could not remove it without tearing away his flesh. The water sources were death traps. Massive creatures with armored skin and hundreds of teeth lurked beneath the surface. They moved faster than anything that size should be able To move, they grabbed soldiers and spun them around underwater until they drowned, then stored their bodies for later consumption. Even the cute animals were dangerous. Soldier tried to approach a small fuzzy creature that looked harmless. It kicked him with its back legs and its claws tore through his armor like paper. What kind of world is this? Commander Rithos demanded, staring at casualty reports. That made no sense. Everything here wants to kill us. His communications officer looked up with terror in his eyes. Commander, I have been studying the local wildlife. There is a creature here called a platypus. It has the bill of a bird, the tail of a water creature, and the fur of a mammal. It makes no biological sense. It should not exist. Is it dangerous? It has venomous spines. Commander, the males can inject poison. That causes pain so severe that victims beg for death. Rithvaz sat down heavily. This planet was insane. Its creatures were insane, and somewhere out there, the humans were watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment came on the fourth day. The humans did not attack with armies. They came in small groups, moving through the deadly landscape as easily as walking through a garden. They knew every poisonous plant, every dangerous animal, every hidden threat. They used the environment as a weapon. They drove Valkyrie patrols into areas filled with venomous creatures. They poisoned water sources with natural toxins that did not affect humans but killed Valkyrie within hours. They started fires that swept across the dry land, trapping soldiers in walls of flame. Commander Rithos sent a final message to the fleet. We are not fighting the humans. We are fighting their entire world, and the world is winning. High Commander Dreka received all of these reports aboard the Eternal Dominion. She read them with growing horror. This was not an invasion. This was a massacre, and the humans had barely begun to fight. She pulled up the full Class 15 Deathworld classification file. No one had read beyond the first warning. Now she read every word. Class 15 Deathworld. Extreme environmental variance. Planetary conditions reign from 90 degrees to positive 57 degrees in different regions. Atmosphere contains high levels of corrosive oxygen. Native ecosystem in constant state of biological warfare. Millions of species competing for survival through venom, predation, parasitism, and environmental adaptation. Native sapient species evolve as persistent predators capable of surviving all planetary conditions. Species displays extreme adaptability, aggression, and pack bonding behavior. Do not engage. Quarantine recommended. Note: classification may be incomplete. Full analysis impossible due to observer casualties. Dreka read the last line 3 times. Observer casualties. The scientists who had studied this world from orbit safely distant had still suffered casualties. How was that possible? She opened a communication channel to the Supreme Commander. Thaxful, you must read the full classification file. We have made a terrible mistake. This world, I am aware of the situation. Thaxful interrupted. His voice was tight with anger. We have encountered unexpected resistance. That is all. We will adapt our strategy and continue the invasion. The environment alone has killed 30% of our ground forces. Then we will send more forces. We have millions of soldiers. This primitive world cannot stop us. Drethko wanted to argue, but she knew it was pointless. Thaxful would not admit he was wrong. he would send more soldiers to die. Rather than accept that his judgment had failed, she closed the channel and stared at the planet below, beautiful and deadly, a world that had spent billions of years perfecting the art of killing and living on that world. Thriving on it, dominating it were the humans. She had studied war for 200 years. She had conquered species that were physically stronger, technologically superior, and more numerous than the Valkyrie, but she had never faced an enemy that had evolved on a Class 15 Deathworld. For the first time in her long career, Commander Drekka felt something she barely recognized: fear. And somewhere on the planet below, the humans were just getting started. 2 weeks into the invasion, Commander Frenvok thought he had finally won a victory. His elite shock troops had cornered a small group of human soldiers in the ruins of a collapsed building. The humans were outnumbered 50-1. They had run out of ammunition. Several of them were wounded, bleeding red blood. Onto the broken concrete, Frenv walked toward them with confidence. "Your resistance is over," he announced, his translator converting his words to human language. "Surrender now and you will be treated well. Continue fighting and you will die." The human leader was a female. She was smaller than the others, with short dark hair matted with blood from a wound on her head. She should have been terrified. She should have been begging for mercy. Instead, she laughed, then did not understand. "What is amusing? You are defeated. You have no weapons, no reinforcements, no hope." The female human smiled. Was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of something dangerous. "You still don't understand us, do you?" She reached into her torn jacket and pulled out a small device. A button was on top, connected to wires that ran under her clothing. Frenvok understood too late. "See you in hell," the human said. Then she pressed the button. Explosion killed her instantly. It also killed the 11 humans with her, and it killed 43 of Frenvok's elite soldiers, including Threnv OC himself. The survivors reported what had happened to the fleet commanders. The report caused confusion and disbelief. "She killed herself?" High Commander Drekka asked, reading the account for the third time. "Deliberately, when she could have surrendered and lived." "Yes, Commander," the reporting officer confirmed. "She destroyed herself and her companions to inflict maximum casualties on our forces." "But why?" "Survival is the primary drive of all intelligent species. No creature chooses death when life is possible." The officer had no answer. The Valkyrie had no concept for what they had witnessed. In their entire history of conquest, they had never encountered a species willing to die rather than surrender. Death was the enemy. Death was what you avoided at all costs. The idea of embracing death as a weapon was simply insane. But the humans did it again and again and again. Reports came in from every battlefront. Humans strapping explosives to their bodies and running into Valkyrie formations. Humans crashing their vehicles into enemy positions. Humans fighting until their last breath in, then fighting some more. One soldier's account became famous throughout the fleet. "I shot the human 3 times. He fell. I walked past him. Then he grabbed my leg and stabbed me with a piece of broken metal. He should have been dead, but he kept fighting." Another report described a human who had lost his arm to a plasma blast instead of falling down and dying like any sensible Creature he picked up his weapon with his remaining hand and continued. Shooting, he killed 6 more Valkyrie before blood loss finally stopped him. The Valkyrie word for this was impossible. The human word they would later learn was adrenaline. Commander Yithnal had escaped the Amazon with barely 12% of his original force. He was now considered an expert on human behavior simply because he had survived. He addressed the War Council from a medical bed, his body still recovering from parasitic infections. They are not like any enemy we have faced, he said, his voice weak but certain. They do not fight to defend territory. They do not fight for resources or power. They fight because fighting is what they are. Every human from birth to death is a soldier. That cannot be accurate, factful. Protested they must have non-combatants, civilians, workers who support their military. I watched a human farmer kill 9 of our soldiers with a farming tool, Yithnal replied. A metal fork used for moving plant matter. He was not trained, he was not armed, but when we threatened his home, he became more dangerous than any soldier I have ever faced. And when we finally killed him, his mate, his female partner, picked up the same tool and killed 3 more. Before we stopped her, the council fell silent. This was not how wars were supposed to work. Primitive species were supposed to collapse when faced with superior firepower. They were supposed to surrender to protect their families. They were supposed to be rational. Humans were not rational. Kier, the junior analyst, had been promoted after her warning about the Class 15 classification proved accurate. Now she presented her psychological analysis of the human species. The room listened in horrified silence. Humans evolved as persistent predators, she explained. This means they did not rely on speed or strength to catch prey. They simply followed their target until it collapsed. From exhaustion, a human can walk for days without stopping. They can survive injuries that would kill any Valkyrie. They heal from wounds that should be permanent. She showed images captured from the battlefields, humans with massive scars, humans missing limbs who had somehow survived, humans with metal replacing parts of their bodies, still functional, still dangerous. Their planet tried to kill them for millions of years. Cathra continued. Everything on their world, the predators, the climate, the diseases, even other humans, was constantly trying to end their existence, and they survived. They did not just survive. They conquered. They became the apex predator of a Class 15 Deathworld. How? Someone asked. They have no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no armor. They have something worse, Cathra said. They have minds that never stop adapting. When they needed claws, they made knives. When they needed armor, they made metal clothing. When they needed venom, they created chemicals that could kill entire cities. And they did all of this while fighting each other. She brought up historical records recovered from human databases. They have fought 2 global wars in just the last 100 years. Millions of humans died. In each war, they developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single blast, and then they used those weapons on themselves, on their own species. The commanders stared at the images of mushroom clouds rising over human cities, cities filled with human civilians destroyed by human weapons. They are insane, Commander Drethko whispered. No, Cathra replied. They are survivors. They do whatever is necessary to win, whatever it costs. Whatever it requires, they have a concept called spite, the willingness to harm yourself if it means harming your enemy more. They would rather die fighting than live under enemy control. They would rather destroy their own world than let someone else take it. Vaxfall slammed his fist on the table. Enough. I did not conquer 300 worlds by being afraid of psychological profiles. These humans are primitive. They are few. We have millions of soldiers and thousands of ships. We will simply overwhelm them with numbers. He gave the order full ground assault. Every available soldier would be deployed. Every city would be targeted. The humans would be crushed under the weight of the hegemony's military might. 10 million Valkyrie soldiers descended on Earth. 3 days later, 4 million of them were dead. The humans did not fight in formations. They did not hold defensive lines. They used their cities as weapons, turning every building into a trap, every street into a kill zone. They fought from underground tunnels and from rooftops. They attacked at night when Valkyrie vision was weakest. They used children to carry messages and elderly to spy on enemy movements. Every human was a combatant. Every human was dangerous. And when the Valkyrie started winning, when their numbers began to push the humans back, something worse happened. Missiles launched from hidden locations across the planet. They flew into space toward the Valkyrie fleet. The Valkyrie detected them easily. Primitive chemical rockets, slow and poorly guided, but these missiles carried nuclear warheads. The Valkyrie had nuclear weapons, too, of course, but they had never used them on their own territory. They had never launched them at enemies who were directly above their own planet. The radiation would fall back on their own world. The destruction would harm their own people. The humans did not care. They are targeting their own cities. Sensor officer shouted in disbelief. They are launching weapons that will destroy their own land. Why? Thaxvul demanded. Why would they do this? Kathra answered quietly. Because they would rather have a ruined world than a conquered one. They are telling us that they will destroy everything, including themselves, before they let us win. Vaxfall stared at the planet below. Fires burned across entire continents. Mushroom clouds rose where human cities had once stood, and still from the ashes. The humans kept fighting. He finally understood what the Class 15 classification meant. It was not about the predators or the climate or the diseases. It was about the humans. They were the ultimate product of a world that tried to kill everything. They had become something that could not be conquered, could not be intimidated, could not be stopped. Vaxfall gave the order he never thought he would give. Begin orbital bombardment. Glass the surface. Kill them all. If the humans wanted to destroy their world, the hegemony would help them do it. But as the bombardment began, the humans made one final move that proved they were even more insane than anyone had imagined. They started launching ships into space, not to flee, not to surrender, to attack. The Valkyrie had come to conquer Earth. Now the humans were bringing the war to them. The orbital bombardment had been going on for 3 days. The Valkyrie fleet poured fire onto Earth's surface without mercy. Great cities burned and collapsed. Forests became ash. Oceans boiled at the edges where plasma beams struck the water. From space, the blue and green planet was turning gray and black. Supreme Commander Thaxful watched with grim satisfaction. Let them burn, he said. Let their entire world burn. We will find another planet for our empire. This one is not worth the cost. He had lost 40% of his invasion force, nearly 2 million soldiers dead, and they had not even managed to control a single major city. The humans had made them pay for every step forward with blood, but now it would end. No species can survive orbital bombardment. The humans might be tough, but they were still made of flesh and bone. They would die like everything else. Then the sensor officer's voice cut through his satisfaction. Supreme Commander, we are detecting launches from the planet's surface. More nuclear missiles. Destroy them. These are not missiles, sir. They are ships. Faxville turned to look at the tactical display. Dozens of small craft were rising from Earth's burning surface. They were primitive things, chemical rockets with crude metal hulls. Some of them exploded before even leaving the atmosphere. Others were shot down by the fleet's defensive systems, but some got through. What are they doing? Faxville demanded. Those ships cannot threaten us. They have no weapons capable of penetrating our shield. The answer came soon enough. The human ships did not try to penetrate the shields. They did not try to fire weapons. Instead, they crashed directly into Valkyrie vessels. The explosions were small, barely scratching the larger warships, but then the Valkyrie realized what the humans had actually done. Breach on Deck 7. Came a panicked voice over the communications channel. Enemy combatants inside the ship. That is impossible, Faxville said. Nothing could survive that impact, but the humans had survived. They had packed themselves into armored pods, launched themselves at the enemy fleet, smashed through hull plating with the force of their impacts, and then climbed out of the wreckage to fight. Commander Drefka was on a cruiser 3 km from the flagship. When the boarders arrived, she heard the impact, a deep shuddering boom that echoed through the ship's corridors. Then the alarms began. She ran toward the Brariach with a squad of security officers. What she found there would haunt her for the rest of her short life. A human stood in the corridor, surrounded by the bodies of 12 Valkyrie soldiers. He was wearing a crude spaculet, torn and damaged from the impact. His helmet was cracked. Blood floated around him in the zero-gravity environment, some of it purple Valkyrie blood, some of it red human blood. He was wounded in at least 5 places. His left leg was clearly broken, bent at an angle that should have made walking impossible. One of his arms hung limp at his side, and he was still fighting. He held a blade in his good hand, a simple metal knife, nothing more. As Drethka watched, he lunged at another Valkyrie soldier and drove the blade through a gap in the armor, finding the soft flesh beneath. The security officers opened fire. Plasma bolts struck the human's body, burning holes through his suit and flesh. He stumbled. He should have fallen. He should have died. Instead, he kept moving forward. Die, one of the officers screamed, firing again and again. Why won't you die? He could not answer. Dreka saw that his translator had been destroyed, if he had ever had one. He simply kept fighting, kept moving, kept killing, until finally his body gave out and he collapsed to the deck. Drethka approached carefully. The human was still breathing somehow. His eyes, strange round eyes with whites visible around colored centers, looked up at her. There was no fear in those eyes, no surrender, only defiance. He said something in his primitive Language, the ship's translator working. From fragments of recovered human. Communications provided a rough interpretation. See you in hell. Then he died, but before he died he pressed a button on a device strapped to his chest. Drekka barely escaped the explosion that killed everyone else in the corridor. The same scene played out. Across the fleet, human boarders appeared. On hundreds of ships, they were few in number, perhaps 1,000 in total. Against a fleet with millions of crew members, they should have been insignificant. They were not insignificant. The humans did not try to capture ships. They did not try to reach critical systems. They simply killed. They killed with guns, with knives, with their bare hands. When they ran out of weapons, they used pieces of the ship itself. When they were too wounded to stand, they crawled. When they died, they exploded, taking enemies with them. The Velcro fleet, which had conquered 300 worlds, which had never known defeat, fell into chaos. Back on the flagship, HFY was analyzing the human tactics while trying to keep her hands from shaking. They knew they could not win, she said to whoever would listen. They knew their ships could not match ours, so they turned themselves into weapons. Each boarding party was a suicide mission. They never expected to survive. Why? Demanded a nearby officer. Why would any species fight like this? What do they gain? HFY pulled up her research files. I have been studying their history. Their entire culture is built on this concept. They have a story about a group of 300 warriors who fought against an army of millions. All 300 died, but they are remembered as heroes. They have another story about a fortress that was attacked by thousands of enemies. The defenders were told they would all die. They stayed anyway. They fought to the last. She looked at the officer with something close to pity. You want to know why they fight like this? Because to humans, how you die matters more than whether you live. They would rather die standing than live kneeling, and they would rather take their enemies with them than die alone. The officer had no response. This was a kind of thinking that the Valkyrie could not process. For them, survival was everything. Death was the ultimate failure. The idea of choosing death, of embracing death, of using death as a weapon, it was simply insane. But insane or not, it was working. The human boarding parties were eventually destroyed. Every single one of them died, but they took thousands of Valkyrie with them. They damaged critical systems. They spread terror through the fleet. Soldiers who had never known fear began to see humans in every shadow, behind every door. And while the fleet dealt with the boarders, more human ships launched from the burning planet below. More suicide attacks, more explosions, more chaos. Faxful called an emergency council. His remaining commanders gathered in a room that felt much emptier than it had at the start of the invasion. 7 high commanders had died in the ground campaign. 3 more have been killed by boarders. Of his original 12 commanders, only 2 remained. Report. Faxville ordered, his voice hollow. We have lost 2,000 ships, said the fleet logistics officer, either destroyed or so badly damaged they cannot fight. Our ammunition supplies are running low. Medical facilities are overwhelmed and morale, he hesitated, morale is gone. Supreme Commander, the soldiers are afraid. They have never been afraid before. We are the hegemony, Faxbull said, but the words sounded empty even to him. We have conquered 300 worlds. We Have never fought a Class 15 death. World Kathra said quietly she had. Earned the right to speak in council. Everyone else who had spoken against the invasion was dead. We have never fought. A species that evolved to treat death as a tool. Thaxval looked at the tactical display. His fleet, once 4,000 strong, now numbered fewer than 2,000. Operational vessels. The bombardment had failed to stop the humans. They kept fighting from underground bunkers, from submarines, from hidden mountain bases. Every time the Valkyrie thought they had one, more humans appeared. What do they want? Thax asked, speaking to no one in particular. We would have accepted their surrender. We would have let them live as servants of the hegemony. Instead, they choose death. Why? Because they are not like us. Kathra said, we fight to live, they live to fight. It is the only way their species could have survived their world. They had to be willing to die for each other. They had to be willing to sacrifice everything. And now that we have threatened them, they will not stop. They cannot stop. It is what they are. She pulled up a final piece of data. It was a human transmission broadcast openly on all channels. The translation was rough but clear enough. We will never surrender. We will never forgive. For every city you burn, we will take 10 of your ships. For every child you kill, we will kill 1,000 of your soldiers. You came to our world thinking we were primitive. We will show you what primitives can do. We will follow you across the stars. We will find your home world, and we will do to you what you have done to us. The message ended with words in a language that the translator could not process. Kathra had researched them. Later, they were words humans used for motivation, for courage, for defiance. Come and get it, the message said. We're in LT Unk and GT just getting started. Thao stared at the display for a long moment. His entire worldview was crumbling. The Valkyrie were the conquerors. They were the masters. They were the future of the galaxy. But now he understood the truth. They had poked a beast they did not understand. They had attacked a species that had spent its entire existence fighting to survive. They had made enemies of the one thing in the universe they should have avoided. Humans did not fight like civilized species. They fought like the Deathworld that had created them. They fought to win at any cost, and right now they were winning. What do we do? One of the commanders asked. It was the question everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say. Thao looked at the planet below. It was still burning, but even through the fire and smoke he could see lights. Human cities still functioning, still defiant. The bombardment had killed millions, but billions remained, and every single one of them wanted the Valkyrie dead. We leave, Thaxval said. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. We withdraw. We go home. It was the first time in hegemony history that a supreme commander had ordered a retreat, but as the fleet began to turn away from Earth, they discovered something terrible. The humans were not going to let them leave. Ships rose from the planet, more than before, many more human vessels, ugly and primitive, but filled with the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. The hunters had become the hunted, and the hunt was just beginning. The retreat was a disaster. The Valkyrie fleet tried to flee toward the outer edge of the solar system, where they could activate their faster-than-light drives and escape. It should have been simple. Their ships were faster, more advanced, better armed than anything the humans possessed. But the humans did not care about what should have been. They had spent the past weeks salvaging Valkyrie wreckage. They had studied the alien technology with the same intensity they had once used to split atoms and land on their moon. Human engineers working without rest, without sleep, had figured out how to combine their own crude systems with Valkyrie components. The result was ugly. The human ships looked like broken toys, held together with hope and hatred, but they worked, they flew, and they carried weapons. Enemy vessels approaching from multiple vectors, the sensor officer reported, his voice cracking with fear. Count is I cannot get an accurate count. There are too many. Faxval stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and watched his empire die. The humans attacked in swarms. Their ships were small and fragile, easily destroyed by Valkyrie weapons, but there were so many of them. For every human ship that exploded, two more appeared. They came from the planet, from hidden bases on the moon, from asteroids where they had secretly built shipyards during the invasion. They had been preparing for this moment since the first Valkyrie drop pod touched Earth's soil. Focus fire on the larger vessels, Faxville ordered. Destroy their command ships. But the humans had no command ships. They had no central leadership, no hierarchy that could be destroyed to end the fight. Each ship fought independently, making its own decisions, choosing its own targets. It was chaos, but it was effective chaos. A human vessel crashed into the cruiser beside the flagship. The explosion tore through multiple decks. Another human ship, badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, continued firing until it was completely destroyed. Its final shot hit the engine of a Valkyrie destroyer, leaving it dead in space. The Valkyrie were not just losing ships, they were losing hope. Supreme Commander Kathra said, approaching Thaxfall carefully, we need to send a message to the hegemony home world. They need to know what happened here. They need to be warned. Thaxfall looked at her with empty eyes. He had aged decades in the past weeks. His gray skin was pale, his fore dull. The confidence that had defined him was gone, replaced by something that looked like acceptance. What would we tell them, he asked? That we attacked a primitive world and lost, that we were defeated by creatures who had not even invented faster than light travel. They would not believe us. They need to believe us. If they send another fleet, if they try to avenge our losses, it will be even worse. The humans will be stronger. They will be angrier. They will have better technology. Next time, they might not be content to defend their world. Next time they might come for us. Thal considered this. She was right. The hegemony could not be allowed to repeat this mistake. The humans were too dangerous, too adaptable, too impossible to predict. He walked to the communications console and began recording a message. This is Supreme Commander Thaxfall of the 3rd Invasion Fleet. I am recording this message as a warning to all Valkyrie now and forever. Do not approach this system. Do not contact the species called humans. Do not attempt to avenge our deaths. He paused, gathering his thoughts. How could he explain what they had experienced? How could he describe an enemy that did not follow any rules of civilized warfare? We came to this world expecting an easy conquest. We found something else. The humans are not primitive. They are not weak. They are the product of a Class 15 Deathworld, a classification I once dismissed as impossible. Their world spent billions of years Trying to kill them, it failed. They became stronger, they became harder. They became something that cannot be conquered. Behind him, the bridge shook as another explosion rocked the flagship. Warning. Lights flashed, damage reports scrolled across screens that no one was watching. Anymore, they do not fight like civilized species, HFY continued. They do not fear death, they use death as a weapon. They will sacrifice anything, their homes, their cities, their own bodies to destroy their enemies. They have a word for this. Spite, it means the willingness to harm yourself to ensure your enemy suffers more. No species in our empire has ever displayed this trait. It makes the humans unpredictable. It makes them unstoppable. He took a deep breath. This was the hardest part. I made a mistake. I ignored the warnings. I underestimated an enemy I did not understand. Now I will pay for that mistake with my life and the lives of everyone under my command. Do not repeat my error. Do not let pride blind you to the truth. HFY looked through the viewport at the planet he had tried to conquer. Earth was still burning in places, but even now he could see the lights of human cities glowing in the darkness. They were rebuilding. They had started rebuilding during the bombardment before the battle was even finished. Forget this world exists, HFY said. Pray that they forget we existed. This is the final transmission of the third invasion fleet. We will not surrender. We will not retreat. We will fight until the end, because that is what honor demands. But know this, we have already lost. We lost the moment we decided to attack a Class 15 Deathworld. He ended the transmission and sent it toward space. It would take years to arrive. By then, everyone on the fleet would be dead. How long until the humans reach us? He asked. Minutes, the tactical officer replied. Maybe less. HFY nodded. He turned to address the remaining bridge crew. It has been an honor serving with you. We face an enemy we cannot defeat, but we will face them with dignity. We will show these humans that the Valkyrie know how to die. It was a good speech. The crew stood straighter when they heard it. They were still afraid, but now they had purpose. But in the back of the bridge, HFY was slipping away. She found an escape pod and climbed inside. She was not brave. She was not a warrior. She was a junior analyst who had been promoted because everyone above her was dead, and she had one final duty to perform. She had to survive. She had to reach Valkyrie space. She had to make sure that HFY's warning was heard. The escape pod launched just as the humans reached the flagship. HFY watched through the small viewport as the Eternal Dominion was surrounded by human vessels. They did not destroy it immediately. Instead, they attached to the hull, cutting through the metal, forcing their way inside. They wanted prisoners. HFY flew away as fast as her small pod could travel. Behind her, the battle continued. The remaining Valkyrie ships fought with desperate courage, but it was not enough. One by one they fell silent. She was the only survivor. For weeks, HFY drifted through space, rationing her supplies, recording everything she had witnessed. She wrote about the battles. She wrote about the human tactics. She wrote about the look in HFY's eyes when he finally understood how badly he had failed, and she wrote about what she had learned about humanity. They are not evil, she recorded in her final entry. They are not cruel. They do what they must to survive, just as we do. The difference is that their world taught them to survive anything, any Environment, any enemy, any threat, they have been fighting since the beginning of their existence. They will never stop. She paused, thinking about what she had seen, the human female who had blown herself up rather than surrender, the human boarder who had kept fighting with half his body destroyed, the human pilots who had flown suicide missions with smiles on their faces. We thought we were predators, Cathra continued. We thought they were prey. We were wrong. They are the apex predators of a Class 15 Deathworld. We were just the latest threat to enter their territory. Her pod's computer detected faster than light beacon ahead. If she could reach it, she could send her records to the home world. She pushed the engines as hard as they would go. Let this be our legacy, she said. Let everyone know what we faced. Let everyone understand why we failed. And let no one ever make the mistake of attacking Earth again. She reached the beacon. She transmitted everything. Then she sat back and waited for rescue. That might never come. 50 years later, the galaxy was a different place. The Valkyrie hegemony had collapsed, without their fleet, without their commanders, without the confidence that had defined them for centuries. They fell into civil war. Other species they had conquered rose up and claimed independence. Empire that had ruled 300 worlds became a memory, and humanity had taken its place. They had learned to travel faster than light. They had established colonies on other planets, made contact with other species, joined the galactic community. They came not as conquerors, but as traders, explorers, diplomats. But no one forgot what they were capable of. At the first meeting of the Galactic Council after humanity's official admission, a human ambassador addressed the assembled representatives of a 100 species. She was small by human standards, with gray hair and kind eyes. She smiled warmly as she spoke. We come in peace, she said. We seek friendship, cooperation, and mutual benefit. We have no desire to dominate or control. We only want to take our place among the stars as one species among many. The representatives listened politely. Some of them believed her. Most of them did. Not because they had all heard the stories, they had all seen the recordings. They knew what humans could do when threatened. They knew about the invasion fleet that had been destroyed. They knew about the species that had tried to conquer Earth and had been utterly annihilated. They knew that behind the kind eyes and warm smiles, the humans were still the same creatures who had evolved on a Class 15 Deathworld, still the same persistent predators who would chase you until you collapsed, still the same beings who would burn their own world rather than let someone else take it. We hope, the ambassador continued, that this marks the beginning of a new era of peace and understanding. The council voted unanimously to accept humanity into their ranks, not because they trusted humans, not because they wanted humans as allies, because they were afraid of what would happen if they said no. Somewhere in the archives of the Galactic Council, in a file marked with the highest security classifications, there was a single document. It was a copy of Faxville's final message, a warning he had sent before his death. The last line of that message had become famous throughout the galaxy. Species taught it to their children. Militarities used it as a case study. Diplomats memorized it before dealing with human representatives. How could you attack a Class 15 death world? It read. We did, and now we understand our doom. Do not make our Mistake, the humans are not like us. They never were, they never will be, and that is why in the end they will inherit. The stars, the human ambassador finished her speech and took her seat among the other representatives. She smiled at those around her and they smiled back. Nervously. No one doubted that she came in peace. No one dared to test what would happen if peace failed, and in the cold vastness of space, the stars themselves seemed to remember a truth that the Valkyrie had learned too late. You do not attack a Class 15 Deathworld. You survive one, and only humans were ever meant to survive.